Good morning, everyone. My name is Devin Fishburne, Marketing Manager at MDIC, and I'm here to wish you a very warm welcome to our very first edition of MDIC Live, a fireside chat style live video series highlighting the latest projects, resources, and happenings within the Medical Device Innovation Consortium. This series will connect you to MDIC's amazing staff of thought leaders and a few subject matter experts as we look to tackle some of the most advanced topics from around the healthcare landscape. I'm incredibly excited to introduce to you all our very first guest of the series, just recently appointed President and CEO of MDIC. Our first guest brings with him a wealth of medical device knowledge and a clear vision for the future of this space. Please join me in welcoming Andy Fish to the stage.
Devin, thank you very much. It's great to be with you. I'm very excited not only be here with MDIC, but also for this series that's coming up ahead, and proud to be our first guest.
Good morning. Thank you, Andy, for joining us. For those of us that are joining via Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, just a reminder that this session will be interactive. So before we get into the interview, I just want to let you all know you can feel free to post questions, feel free to keep the conversation going in the chat, and let us know if you have any questions for Andy or any general thoughts. No matter what platform you're on, keep the interactivity going, and we look forward to hearing from you. Now, without further ado, Andy, let's get into our first question. For those of us who are not familiar with you or don't know about your experience, tell us a little bit about yourself, some of your personal, professional experiences, and how you see your role at MDIC.
Sure, Devin, thank you. So just to look back a little bit over my time, which has been primarily focused in DC, I've spent about 20 years now in healthcare policy and advocacy, primarily focused on FDA matters, but also on issues related to coding, coverage, reimbursement, and adoption of medical technologies. And prior to this work, I first learned how to navigate high-level federal political and policy issues in Washington as a committee staffer in the Senate, and then as Assistant Secretary of Agriculture for Congressional Relations. And after leaving government service, I led the federal government relations team for the American Cancer Society, which helped me better appreciate a patient's perspective on the healthcare system and understand the power of patient advocacy. I then led federal and state government relations and served as general counsel for the Consumer Healthcare Products Association, whose members are the companies that make non-prescription drugs. So I got a deep level of insight into another area of FDA policy on the pharmaceutical side, and continued to gain association and advocacy experience. And then 12 years ago, I joined AdvaMed, the Advanced Medical Technology Association, to start AdvaMed's corporate division focused on diagnostic test manufacturers. And then I moved through several roles with AdvaMed, including overseeing the regulatory, payment, and global departments at the association, and founding and leading AdvaMed's Center for Digital Health. And through all of that time at AdvaMed, I really came to appreciate the wide range of medical technologies, how fast the field is evolving, and the tremendous value that medical technologies are bringing to healthcare. And I also, of course, got to work with many medtech companies throughout my time at AdvaMed, and understand better their fundamental commitment to advancing healthcare, as well as the challenges that they face in getting new products to patients and clinicians in a timely way. So now in my new position as president and CEO of MDIC, I'm working with the team here to focus on continued improvement in how we get our work done, ensure that we're inclusive regarding the stakeholders that we bring to the table, and position the work of the consortium with an eye toward the long-term future of the role of medical technology in health and healthcare, which is just tremendously exciting. And I'm really thrilled to be here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you, of course, and with all those experiences that you bring to the table, we're looking forward to seeing how you can help shape MDIC. But with all those experiences as well, the question becomes, why MDIC? What makes this opportunity unique and special to you, and what are you looking forward to most?
Well, so first of all, it's a personal opportunity to continue working in the medical technology field. I'm really kind of a science and tech nerd at heart. Went to college thinking I was going to major in a hard science area, went in multiple other directions. But throughout my career in DC, even long before I came to AdvaMed, I always gravitated towards issues that were science and technology in nature, public policy issues related to science and technology. So when I fell into medtech, it was just really a fantastic opportunity to understand better this really dynamic field. And so coming here to MDIC is just an opportunity to continue that learning for me personally. The medical technology field is a cornerstone of healthcare. It's dynamic, it's innovative, it's rapidly evolving. And some of what's going on in medtech is fundamentally bringing revolutionary changes to healthcare. And I would argue, and I'm biased, that medtech is a tremendous, majority of, in fact, what's going on in healthcare. If you think about the hospital setting or other care settings, everything except people and pharmaceuticals is medical technology of one kind or another. So medical technology is not just ubiquitous, but fast changing and really bringing amazing changes to the future of healthcare. But MDIC also is unique. So for the folks that don't know the consortium well, I think it's important to point out that rather than working as an advocacy organization that seeks to change laws and regulations, MDIC is the only organization that provides a permanent, neutral forum for federal agencies, medical technology manufacturers, patient advocates, payers, and other stakeholders to all come together to advance the science underlying medical technology development, regulation, and adoption. As a consortium whose founding members include the Food and Drug Administration and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and now work with a multitude of other federal agencies, MDIC is at its core a public-private partnership, which means we have a unique ability to develop collaborative consensus on ways to break down barriers to more effective patient care. And with my background in medical technology, I could appreciate the value of MDIC, and coming here is a compelling opportunity to continue contributing to this field.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, the wealth of experience that you have connecting with our various members and with the landscape as a whole is certainly beneficial in this position. With that being said, given all your experiences, what are some of the things that you're looking forward to kind of bringing to MDIC? What are some ways that you hope to kind of make your mark and advance the topic from here?
So my vision for MDIC is not about my mark per se, but rather an aspiration to keep MDIC on a path of continuous improvement and ever greater impact, and staying true to our values of inclusion and collaboration, and to our mission of advancing patient and public health through innovative medical technologies. But I will say that in addition to identifying with our stakeholders the issues where MDIC can continue to make the most difference for patients, I'm also going to be focused on two imperatives that I believe we need to thread through all of our activities. And the first is assuring trust, that our work is founded on trusted relationships, and that we not only maintain trust with our stakeholders, but also ensure that our work is trusted by our wider audiences. And second, addressing health disparities and inequity to the extent that we can, by always being mindful that there are structural disparities in healthcare and outcomes, and seeking to identify where our work can take into account and potentially mitigate the effects of those disparities. So those are not issues that are entirely new to MDIC, but that's some of the emphases that I'm looking to kind of to bring to our work as kind of the underpinning of the way we go about our work. And I also would say, part of what I am bringing to MDIC is an emphasis on thinking to the future, not just 5 years out, but really thinking about what is medical technology going to do to reshape healthcare in 2040 and 2050. And no one has a crystal ball of exactly what the healthcare system is going to look like in 2050. But I think that given the innovations that are sort of coming on the market now and are in progress, you can actually start to see how fundamentally issues, technologies in digital health and increasingly sophisticated technologies really are going to distribute care outside of intensive care settings, are going to bring care to people where they are when they need it, and yield ever greater insights in the field of digital health, for example. And so I'm looking forward to helping MDIC think through not just the work that we're doing now, but also keep an eye on what that long-term future of medical technology is going to bring to healthcare, and think about how we work with all our stakeholders to kind of set up the best possible environment for that innovation to proceed as quickly as possible. And that's fundamentally at the heart of what MDIC's mission is all about, right? It's working with regulators and other stakeholders to create the best possible environment to get the most out of medical technology for patient care. So that's why I'm excited about the future of healthcare as driven by medical technology. It's why I'm excited about the future of MDIC.
Yeah, of course. MDIC has a unique position as being sort of the table makers in the conversation of healthcare, and really laying out the groundwork for the future of innovation and the future of medtech. But to step to the past for a second, and you talk through a lot of your experiences, congressional, private industry experience. How have you seen the medical device landscape change over the years? What are some of the things you've noticed, and what are their relevance to MDIC? How are you bringing those trends to your current work?
So there's so much going on in medical technology. It's not really possible to say that there's one or two things that characterize the field, right? There's a lot of developments that are, some are technology, some are business models. But I would call it, I think, a few things that are among those that are really important for folks to understand about where medical technology is taking healthcare. And one is the increasing connectedness of technologies, right? So thinking about digital health broadly, but giving some specific examples. Think about diabetes. Diabetes technology is a great example of where continuous glucose monitors and wireless technology are bringing together automated insulin pump systems, complete integrated solutions that can automatically deliver insulin to patients when they need it, in the amount that they need it, with very little personal intervention, and devices that can both monitor a patient who has diabetes, monitor their health status, their diabetes status, and report out in an automated way to clinicians, to their caretakers, and so forth. And so that's just one example of where the technologies, the medical technology, the digital piece of that, the data component, all of those things have been brought together into an integrated system. And we're going to see that increasingly happen across other areas in health conditions and in medical technology. And so that ability to bring ever more sort of seamless solutions to patients where they are, to improve their quality of life, their health status, that's what medical technology is driving. And so that overall trend, that move towards more seamless, connected healthcare, is just going to continue to improve, life for patients. And part of that also is, again, about moving healthcare out of settings where it's resource intensive, right? So going into a hospital, resource intensive system, right? That's a costly place to get healthcare. Perhaps that's understandable, but it is costly, right? There's, a proliferation of resources brought together in those settings to deliver care. It's possible now to increasingly serve patients' needs outside of the hospital, not just in innovations like telehealth, right, that provide for remote interaction, but actually to use technologies to monitor patients' health, even to automate, treatment potentially outside of a hospital, maybe in a lower intensive care setting, or even at home. And so increasingly, I think we're going to see the distribution of healthcare into a variety of settings as facilitated by medical technologies. In some case, simply a data-driven, technology that better moves data between a patient and a clinician. In other cases, as in diabetes is a great example, where we're going to see actual therapeutic intervention that is increasingly possible to happen outside of traditional healthcare settings. So that is a trend that will just continue. It'll continue to reshape healthcare. I think it'll continue to bring advances to healthcare that will be more efficient and more effective for patients, and allow more patients to access healthcare who may have barriers right now to accessing healthcare in traditional settings. And I want to come back to one more point about the impact of digital health, because it isn't just about the improvements that I've just kind of talked about in those trends. It's also the ability to accumulate knowledge, right, about health conditions and understand health in new ways, fundamentally to advance research and our understanding of various health conditions through the accumulation of novel data that we couldn't collect before, but now could collect. Let me give just one example, right? So if you think about getting a lab test, you go in once a year. Maybe we don't even all go in once a year, but you should go in periodically and get a standard array of blood tests, right? That's a one-time look at a metric that may or may not be particularly relevant to your health status, or may not tell us a whole lot about what's going on with an individual's health conditions. But with the ability to increasingly have wearables and implantables and other devices that actually could take those measurements much more frequently, in some cases continuously monitor what's going on with various important sort of diagnostic metrics in your body. Not only can you monitor a person more frequently or even continuously, that's a whole new insight into health that we haven't had before. So if you can monitor even just like, say, cholesterol levels over the course of a day and a week and a year, you get a whole lot of new insight into the correlation between various cholesterol levels, or even, sort of causative relationships between cholesterol levels and health that you don't see if you just go in occasionally for blood work. So that's just, again, another example of where we can get old information in novel ways. We can accumulate a variety of data that we haven't had before. And medical technology is facilitating all that in combination with the kind of data science that medical technology companies and others in this space are advancing. So in total, that ability to accumulate new kinds of information and information at scale that we haven't had before, again, facilitated by medical technology, is a fundamental revolutionary advance in healthcare. And we're only, in my view, at the beginning of that. That is going to continue to unfold in the years ahead in ways that we can start to imagine now, and in some ways that we may not even anticipate. But that's a fundamental advance. And so I want to take a moment to bring that back to MDIC's work, right? Because one of the challenges for regulators and many other stakeholders, including medical technology developers, is how do you assess these new kinds of data? So, for example, what we call real-world evidence, right? Evidence, information about the experience that patients are having with healthcare, with medical technologies, or in their health conditions that aren't in a controlled clinical trial, right? So, in the normal course of receiving treatment, for example, patients using medical technologies, we want to better understand what their experience is and understand how those technologies are working, what outcomes are happening, and so forth in the uncontrolled experience, right? The real-world experience. So one of the fundamental questions that we're confronting is, how do you collect that real world information or that real world evidence? How do you actually get that information? How do you bring it together? And how do you assess it in a way that has enough meaning and validity and credibility to inform, for example, FDA's approval decisions of new technologies, right? There's a whole new wealth of data now that we can collect in different environments and different circumstances than the traditional clinical trials. And so that's a fundamental challenge for our industry, for regulators, and MDIC is working on aspects of that, right? The science of real-world evidence. And it will also have bearing on how payers think about what technologies to cover, to reimburse. And it has an effect, of course, on what clinicians decide to use in terms of adopting medical technology. So this whole advance in data science and digital medical technologies is fundamentally reshaping healthcare, but also bringing new challenges for regulators and others in how to use and assess this kind of data. So that's a really good example of where MDIC is focused, because it's not about public policy per se. It's about kind of the science underlying regulatory approvals. It's the science underlying how we use data to improve healthcare through medical technologies. So that's just a couple of the few of the trends that I've been seeing in medical technology, and why MDIC is squarely at the heart of these advances.
And through that, we saw, the advancement of medical device innovation and research has the ability to impact a number of different stakeholders. We talked about regulators and industry, but one of the most, I think, important, or one of the closest to a lot of people in the industry's mind, is patients, and how this has impact on patients. How does MDIC's work think about patients, and how does MDIC look to keep them engaged in this process of innovation and research?
It's a great question, Devin. So, I know, having been in this field for a long time, that patients are the first thing on every medical technology company's minds, right? Ultimately, if we aren't improving health and health status for people and for patients, then we're not focused on the right things. So we are really working to always keep patient interests first and foremost at the center of what we're doing. And that really comes down to a couple of things. One is actually engaging patients and patient advocacy organizations and patient representatives in our work. That is again, as I said earlier, kind of the culture and the philosophy of MDIC, and the purpose of MDIC being originally founded was that it could be a forum and a platform for bringing a myriad of stakeholders together, including, of course, patients. So I think we can do a better job of that. It will be one of my emphases going forward, is to figure out ways to have more patient connections and more patient input into our work. But then also substantively, we are specifically looking at issues that relate to better understanding the patient experience, and how to have the patient experience actually inform how medical technologies are developed, how they are approved and used. And so, for example, we have an initiative around the science of patient input, which is really about how do you assess and determine patient preferences and patient desires, even around fundamental issues of risk benefit, right? If you have a patient community, for example, that has a certain view of what risk they're willing to accept with new technologies, then the question is, should that inform regulatory decisions? Should we take into account specifically what patients want from medical technologies? And I think in general, the answer that everyone's agreed on is yes, but then it raises sort of fundamental questions of how do you collect that information? How do you assess it? What weight should it have in various contexts? How do you evaluate that information in a way that becomes sort of a discipline, right? There's actually, a science and and rigor around patient input. And that's a field that, in my understanding, is actually pretty well advanced in some other regions of the world. And so it's a focus of ours to advance that understanding here in the US. But it's a perfect example of where we not only want to and do include patients and patient voices in our work, but also have work specifically focused on how do you include patients more structurally and systematically in the actual work of medical technology companies and regulators, and so that patient voice actually has an impact on the way medical technologies are developed, approved, and adopted.
Great. And so MDIC has, always has the goal of keeping patients in mind, and keeping patients kind of at the forefront of the conversation. What are some other goals for MDIC? And, can you outline sort of what are the strategies going forward with the consortium?
Sure. Well, I guess I could, say and maybe emphasize again, fundamentally, our goal is to have an impact, right? It's not just to examine these issues. It's to come up with solutions that actually drive change. And those changes include the ways that medical technology companies assess and develop products so that they're more effective when they're in use, that they're and that companies and FDA working together understand better how to develop the evidence that FDA needs to approve products in a more timely way, that we can get advances in medical technology to patients sooner. So of course, that's a fundamental overall goal of the organization. And as we go forward, we will continue to look for the issues in which we can have the most impact, right? The issues that also matter most to advancing healthcare for the benefit of patients. Now, I will say, we all aspire to be better known, actually, and I think our longer term goal is to be widely known as one of the most effective organizations that are advancing patient and public health. We have been doing, continue to do, and will be doing extremely important work that's having a significant impact. But I think we can raise our profile and we can bring a lot more stakeholders into our work, which will not only better inform the work that we're doing, but also result in greater impact because we'll get more uptake of the outcomes and the outputs and the sort of recommendations and policies, not policy, but science, sort of regulatory science solutions that we're developing will be better, widely adopted, the more stakeholders we have participating in that work. So that's a kind of a set of our goals and our overall aspiration to be better known and to make sure that more stakeholders understand exactly how important and effective our work is.
And for those that are joining us that aren't as familiar with MDIC and kind of what some of the outputs are, how does MDIC show impact? How do we achieve impact? And what are some of the impacts we hope to have?
So I will say most tangibly, some of the impact that we seek to have is informing regulators about how to better use the kind of information that we now can generate. For example, I talked earlier about digital health and the kind of data that we can generate with new technologies. So back to this issue of real world evidence, right? That is an example of where we are not just tackling an issue conceptually. We are working with FDA to better characterize real world evidence so that companies can collect real world evidence, assess it, and bring that information back to regulators to inform regulatory decisions about product improvements and new products coming to the market. That's an impact, right? That is a very significant impact because it means that we can get innovations to patients faster. In another context, we've been working for a long time on our Case for Quality initiative, which has multiple dimensions to it, but includes continuous improvement at the sort of product development and manufacturing level to ensure high quality products. And the impact there is, again, improvement in quality, but also ultimately time to market, and building up a level of quality of applications to FDA and so forth. So in every area in which we work, we're seeking first to evaluate what is the impact we can have, right? And we're identifying challenges in medical technology as it comes to approvals and adoption. And so we are going after solutions to those barriers that are slowing down access by patients. So.
Okay. And so to zoom out for a second, so we've talked a lot about what the impact of MDIC would be and what some of the goals are, but give us an overview of what does the future of MDIC look like in your mind?
Well, I think, I characterize it broadly in terms of having a reputation and a known status as one of the most effective organizations advancing patient and public health through medical technology. The future of MDIC, I think, in the longer term, is an ever expanding professional staff here. I will say, and should have said it right up front, that one of the things that I've really been impressed by is the staff here at MDIC, not just professional expertise in managing the kind of work we have, but background and substantive knowledge of our staff, who bring a wealth of experience in medical technology and related areas to this work. We are going to continue to build out this complement of professional staff, and as we identify new areas to work in, that's the kind of expertise that we're bringing here. But again, we're leveraging the input of myriad stakeholders, all relevant stakeholders, to drive our work as well. So I think if we talk about kind of the future of MDIC, you'll just see that continue to have more and more power behind it. And then I will say also, as we think about the range of entities that are interested in our work or could be interested in our work, I expect to see us having a even greater diversity of partners who are bringing funds in to our work and directing new areas for MDIC. So again, in summary, what I see here is a platform that's been doing tremendous work and has potential to do even more over time. And so I expect to see our work expand and therefore our impact just become greater and greater in the field.
Thank you. And I think we're going to take some time to answer some Q&A questions now from the audience. We have one now that's this person's asked, one of the best ways to protect patients is by increasing innovation and quality operations. I'd love to learn more about the status of MDIC's Advanced Manufacturing Clearinghouse and how this initiative may impact patients, regulators, and stakeholders in the future.
It's a great question. Honestly, I wish that I could answer it in more detail, given that I've only been here a few weeks. I'm afraid I can't answer it in a lot of detail. But the initiative essentially is designed to help companies adopt novel approaches, for example, to manufacturing and to work with FDA on those kind of issues. And to sort of improve operations, to streamline operations and achieve a higher quality of manufacturing. And so I would encourage folks who are interested in that to reach out to us. Obviously, we'll have some information on that on our website. And that's an initiative that we, are taking on. It will continue to grow and advance. And so we'd be happy to, connect folks with our team that's working on that for more information. But it's a great example of how we continue to take on new initiatives, right? And we are helping the medical technology industry do a better job of delivering high quality products, both to get through the regulatory system and to improve again patient health.
Yeah, it definitely speaks to how MDIC's individual projects and initiatives look to achieve our goals. So quality assurance is something we don't think about as a patient protection measure, as a layman, but MDIC's work does bring patients to the forefront of it. So thank you for that question. It does show the interconnectedness beautifully, I think. We have a second question from our audience. This question asks, what goals you have around environmental considerations in medical technology and decreasing medical waste? In a perfect world, would MDIC have a role in convening stakeholders around these issues?
So I will say that, my perception is that this issue is a little bit outside of our core area of focusing really on issues that are more about regulatory science and advancing the way that our manufacturers can work with a variety of public agencies. That isn't to diminish the importance of this issue. I think the medical technology industry, like many others in the private sector, is very focused on sustainability and minimizing negative environmental impact from what they do. I don't see it as something that MDIC will probably take on in the short term, but I will say also, we have and continue to build the capacity to be a convener on issues that are critical in the health technology space. So it's not inconceivable that at some point, especially if there were other organizations focused on this that wanted to use MDIC as that forum, it's possible that we could go into a topic something like that, but it is outside the kind of current core focus of the organization.
Great. Well, thank you, Andy. I want to thank you for joining us here today. We're at time. It's been a great session. It's a wonderful way to kick off MDIC Live. And thank you for being our first guest and sharing with us your vision for MDIC and the future of medtech.
Thank you, Devin. It's great to be with you today.
Thank you. And for anyone that's going to be watching this stream on demand, feel free to still leave comments, questions, reach out to anyone at MDIC or visit us at mdic.org for more information on any of the programs that you've heard here today. Thank you and have a great rest of your day.